Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with the daily dose of doom and gloom. This is your World War III update, and this is the Black Friday edition, apparently. Not the kind of Black Friday that we're accustomed to, though. No, not the one where we would all descend upon the stores and get in fistfights over things that we didn't need just because they were half off. This was a little bit different. This was a good old-fashioned bank run, but not old-fashioned like we're accustomed old-fashioned. You see, back in the day, you actually had to get off your butt, get in the car, go down to the bank, fill out the slip, give it to the human, they would do the transaction, and then you would go home. Or if you wanted to trade or buy a stock, you'd have to actually go to the one wooden phone in town. I'm talking way back now. I'm talking back in the dirty 20s, 30s, 40s. You had to go where they had the one phone and you put the thing on your ear and the operator and the whole 9 yards, and it cost money, and you could only do a certain amount of transactions a day because the system could only handle it. In those days, collapses took a lot longer. We're living in the information age, okay? We're living in the age of light speed telecommunications. And what that means is the faster they are, the faster they fall. The faster our internet connection connects everything together, the faster the whole system can collapse. And that is why in the last 48 hours, we've had two rapid collapses of banks, because to do a withdrawal today, it's simply a matter of pushing a button, okay? That's problematic when we're talking about living in the age of extremes, whether it's finance, high intensity, World War III level conflicts, whether it's climate, whether it's whatever, contagions that are coming out every few years nowadays. It's only going to intensify as we go forward, and that's why, after all, you're on a prepping channel. You don't need me to tell you that any more than I already do. We got bank runs, we got panic, we got gold skyrocketing, we got Bitcoin crashing. Hasn't really proven itself to be a reliable store of value quite yet. Is a total market crash imminent? Some people say so. I guess we'll see come Monday. Lynette Zhang pointed out today that isn't it convenient that these things always seem to happen on Friday when you can't do anything about it. So let's hope that people affected by this are practicing a lot of self-care this weekend, but hopefully you've been hedging your bets. As we've been saying for many, many years, it's probably a good time to diversify your portfolio into things of a hard asset sort. We have lots of nuclear talk on every single continent. A year ago today, if you were to tell me the Russians are firing hypersonic missiles on a daily basis, of which at the time, remember, people still thought was theoretical. We didn't know if they had them. Now they're firing them on a regular. We got nuclear alerts being broadcast to millions of Russian citizens. They recently had one of their broadcasting centers hacked, and it sent out a message telling everybody they need to go to their bunker because the nuclear bombs are inbound. This time, however, it was a lot more specific, and it spooked a lot of people. You have Netanyahu warning Iranians of a horrible nuclear war. You have North Korea literally with the guy with his finger hovering over the button right now, okay? In the next 2 weeks, I would be surprised if the shit didn't hit the fan, especially on the Korean Peninsula. And of course, if it hits there, it's going to hit everywhere. You see, these crises that are unfolding, financial, contagion, climate-based, I call it climate conflict contagion because they all feed into each other. The worse one gets, the more destabilized the other ones get, and the greater the likelihood of escalation until you just have a system-wide collapse. And like I said in the last video, we're not going to be able to live in a peaceful multipolar world. As much as I would love to be an idealist about it, you just can't have that. That's called a Cold War. We tried that. We tried having 2 superpowers. Imagine having 3 superpowers, a good old Mexican standoff in the world. Let's see how that pans out for all of us. Now check this out, guys. This is what was being broadcast on Russian airwaves recently. I'll get out of the way a little bit here. This is the message that was shown to millions of Russian people. Imagine getting a message like this. Put yourself in this person's shoes. You know about what's going on. You know about all the nuclear saber rattling and all that stuff. And you see this message come on your screen that you need to get to your bunker, and you get the nuclear logo and everything. You got to take your potassium iodide. You got to get your gas mask, and you got to get to your shelter immediately. Now, obviously, I don't know if this is the most official looking hack that they probably could have came up with. They probably could have came up with something that looked far more official and convincing. But regardless, how would you respond? I mean, we're living in a day and age where you have to take this stuff as if it was real world, okay? You can't act as if it's an exercise. And this is what one of my concerns would be as we enter the disinformation age and the deepfake age, is people are not going to know what's real. There's going to be doubt now. And you're going to have people who fight, flight, faint, or freeze. So people who are going to fight, you're going to be stoic. You're going to immediately know exactly what you have to do because you're a prepper, and you're going to, just follow the protocol, right? People who are going to flight are going to run around screaming, going crazy, not know what to do with themselves. People are going to freeze. They're just going to be in disbelief. They're not going to know what to do. Some people are going to faint. Some people are just going to not be able to handle the magnitude of the situation. But this is something to think about. Now, what concerns me with this event is, why would they waste a good hack like that on that type of troll? Why wouldn't you use that opportunity to try to, if you were a part of a nation state who was behind this, Ukrainians, or if it was an independent hacking group that was pro-Ukraine, why wouldn't you try to put another message on that was more impactful? Is it that they thought this is what was required in order to put fear into the minds of Russians so that they support the war less and less, to show them that the potential for nuclear reality, to scare them out of this war, so to speak? It could be possible, but you would think that they would try to win people over with some other kind of message. Some people were suspecting that this could have actually been the Russian government who was messing with people, trying to do some sort of social experiment. I don't think so. I don't think that juice would be worth the squeeze, so to speak. But they did provide a detailed message here, and instruction for those listening to take potassium iodide pills, which are typically used in radiation emergencies, as you know if you've been watching this channel for some time. Seal the premises, use gas masks of all types. I don't know why you'd say that. I guess, some sort of respiratory protection. In the absence of gas masks, use cotton gauze bandages. Screens also flashed up with black and yellow radiation sign, warning a message saying everyone immediately to shelter. According to reports, the images interrupted TV and radio programs in Moscow and the Sverdlovsk, I'm mispronouncing that, not even going to try, including the country's fourth largest city. And they came on later. The Russian ministry said that it was a false air raid alert broadcast in Moscow after servers of radio stations and TV channels were hacked. You would think that there'd be some good air gapping to prevent those sort of hacks from occurring, but maybe that's a sign also that there are defectors who perhaps work at these media agencies and aren't supportive of the war, and that's how they're able to get access to the servers. It's hard to say, but something to think about anyways, that I think it's only a matter of time before the Russians are able to do some kind of hack like that here, although I don't know how many people watch TV as it used to be anymore. It would have to be in some other form. It would have to be some kind of deep fake or something like that. I don't know how they would pull it off, if it's even possible, but I think we should expect, at least in some Western countries, that this will be reciprocated by Russian hackers at some point. But I don't know if the Russians would waste a 0 day on that sort of thing or not. In North Korea burned a lot of really expensive missiles today. Apparently they're supposed to be starving, but they're shooting off these really, really expensive missiles, and they're calling for intensified drills in case of a real war. So people need to know that in the next 2 weeks, this is all the images they got here. It looks like they're putting more into their photography than they are into their military, possibly, because they got this thing from all angles. I mean, this is some good cinematography here. Almost as good as when Kim detonated that giant-ass nuke last year. Anyways, in the next 2 weeks, the Americans and the South Koreans are going to be doing a massive drill that effectively simulates going to war with the North Koreans. If that goes nuclear, who knows? But the North Koreans are not happy about that at all, and we could very well see some things go down in the next couple weeks on the Korean Peninsula. Similarly, we have stuff going on in Israel because Netanyahu is very upset for a variety of reasons, because the Saudis and the Iranians buried the hatchet, apparently, and the Iranians are getting ready to get some of these bad boys, Su-35 fighter jets, from the Russians that no doubt the Netanyahu presidency is concerned will complicate their plans to attack the underground nuclear facilities with nuclear weapons, bunker busts, whatever they're planning on doing. And of course, the Iranians are planning on getting S-400 missile defense systems, which will also further complicate that. So time is of the essence for the Israelis. Time is just of the essence everywhere. Everybody, it's a race against the clock. And that's what you don't want. You don't want an arms race. Because right now, everybody is seeing windows of opportunity. The longer people wait, the harder it's going to be, just like Taiwan. China knows the longer they wait, the more the Americans are going to arm them, the harder it's going to be, okay? So anyways, he came out and he actually said this today. I don't think I've ever heard Netanyahu talk like this and say it so explicitly before. In a direct broadcast, Netanyahu warns Iranian people of a horrible nuclear war if Iran gets atomic weapons. Now, I'm not saying I necessarily believe that that's going to be the case. There are people who think that as soon as, if they do even get a nuclear weapon, that they're immediately going to use that. Obviously, that would be the end of them. They would be immediately wiped out. All of the major cities would be destroyed. What would the point of that be? Okay? Some people think they're just that extremist from a religious point of view, or there are extremist people within the Iranian government, I should say, because not all 80 million Iranians obviously think the same way. There are many there who, in fact, as we've seen with protests, who are far more Western in their thinking, okay? But watch my 6 here on the surveillance cameras. It's not looking good, guys. We got the Crimean Peninsula getting ready for an invasion. They're putting all these fortifications up along the beaches. And apparently there's a increased troop presence in Crimea. They're pulling troops to northern Crimea en masse because the idea is that the Ukrainians will come down through Melitopol. They'll cut off the Russians' ability to reinforce Crimea through that way, so they'll be left with just the Kerch Bridge, which of course the Ukrainians could potentially target with more missiles or drones, and then Crimea would be a sitting duck, sort of, because the Russians still have a large fleet in the Black Sea. Regardless, this is what they're doing in Crimea right now. They're building these massive fortifications. So recall that Russia has said Crimea is a red line. So I presume if it's a red line, whatever that means, if the Ukrainians went so far as to do some sort of landed invasion in Crimea, then wouldn't that constitute crossing the red line? So would you need any of this, really, if you were just going to drop a nuke anyways? It's looking like this war is going to be a long one, guys. The Russians are digging in, and they're not making the mistake anymore, I think, that they made during the start of the war, where, you know, there's this huge territory they were trying to cover with not enough guys, and now they're building the fortifications so that if there is trouble and they are pushed back, they can go back and they don't have to worry about losing the places that they've already conquered, so to speak, or freed, liberated, annexed, whatever you want to call it, whatever spin you want to put on that. We got Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, saying that the leaders of the Western world are gripped by war fever and we're closer than ever to world war. You couldn't imagine, you would never imagine hearing these things out of presidents' mouths just a year ago. Just a year ago, you would never imagine that North Korea was getting ready for a real deal nuclear. I mean, you would, but not even that is extreme compared to what? Like, you wouldn't have thought that, you'd have these joint military exercises and the North Koreans would have rolled out, what, like 20 functional ICBMs with nuclear warheads on them, and that we'd be in this situation with China, and that Israel would be ready to nuke Iran, and that the Crimean Peninsula would be, lined with these fortifications, and that Medvedev would be literally every single week saying that nuclear war is right on the horizon, and you got that being broadcast on Russian screens. You got the Russians preparing their fallout shelters, nuclear submarines, the missile silo stuff, the balloon stuff. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. There's probably, it's a 10-page essay at this point. You have 2 U.S. B-52 nuclear bombers circulating over Bulgaria for 2 hours yesterday. That's strange. And it looks as though, in light of the recent missile barrage that Ukraine suffered at the hands of the Russian hypersonic missiles that they're now using on a regular, Poland and Slovakia is saying that this is inhumane and they're ready to send fighter jets to Kiev. Well, we know the decision to send fighter jets has already been made because they're already training pilots on them. They've already primed us to accept it, just like they did with the tank things. They talked about it for a while, just like they did with the HIMARS. You talk about it, you prime people so that when the time comes to actually do it, everybody's ready to accept it, and it's not as big of a red line. And maybe they're even doing that just to prime the Russians. Who knows? We got energy prices on the rise again. If you do plan on keeping chickens in the future, guess what? You're going to have to abide by a lot more rules if you live in the UK. Of course this is happening in the UK, where they have 0 firearms whatsoever. I hope you guys still have a few shotties around there just in case the apocalypse happens. Chickens kept in gardens will have to be registered under new planned rules, and this is of course due to the bird flu, which is only going to get worse. What else do we got here? Let's break this down. Okay, so we got more banks getting ready to collapse here. First Republic Bank, Customers Bank Corp, Sandy Spring Bank Corp, New York Community Bank Corp. I believe, was it Buffett and Friends and his Berkshire Hathaway merry band of misfits, they divested from Bank Corp last year in a big way. So they, old money, the old guard seen a lot of this coming a long time ago. Really what this was, if you think about it, you have the Stonk Bank crash, which was the Silicon Valley Capital. Is that what it's called? Silicon Valley Bank. They went under now. And then you had the Silvergate, which was the crypto bank. And both of these were, at the height of the stock bubble in 2020. It's no surprise that they've collapsed now because they're insolvent because, all the money's dried up and everybody's running scared towards the door. So it's no surprise. It's really the end of that. And unfortunately, what that means, it's good for big tech. It's bad for us because a lot of those startups, and I'm not saying they're all just going to go out of business because some of the money is insured, although a limited amount of it is insured. A lot of those small businesses may have been things that were, focused on future tech development. They were going to be competitive with some of the big players in the space. Really, a lot of the future has been put on hold in the last few years as a result of COVID, as a result of the war, and all of this economic turmoil that we're seeing. So, this is like, some people would say this is how free market capitalism works. It's like a forest fire, you clear out all the old growth. Unfortunately, in this case, you're clearing out a lot of the young growth. Sure, some of it was probably zombie companies that weren't profitable anyways. It was just a bunch of FOMO nonsense. But there probably was a lot that is, I mean, this is big money we're talking about here, hundreds of billions of dollars, okay? So it appears that the bank runs have begun. According to Peter Schiff, he thinks that this is the beginning of the end. What else is new? We'll try to get him back on the show to see what he has to say. The U.S. banking system is on the verge of a much bigger collapse in 2008. Banks own long-term paper at extremely low interest rates. They can't compete with short-term treasuries. Good point. Mass withdrawals from depositors seeking higher yields will result in a wave of bank failures, meaning that it's only the beginning. If you think the crime is bad now, just wait. Just wait. The Fed is, wouldn't want to be Jerome Powell this weekend. That guy's not going to be getting a lot of sleep because they're in a tough spot. You know, it's either they start printing more money and they make inflation worse, or they crash the economy and you just have lots of... Either way, you're going to get stagflation, a lot of people think. So you're going to have a recession, but you're also going to have inflation at the same time, two things that are not supposed to typically, historically, occur at the same time. As I said before, 2 banks collapsed in 48 hours. This was very quick and just a sign that, you know, in the information age, when everything is so interconnected, these things can happen very, very fast. And when they start to happen, it's way too late, guys. So this is why you're never going to get out at the top. If you're playing at this casino, the stock market casino, I've learned that it's good to get out while you're ahead, you know, because especially if there's nothing really there to substantiate all of the optimism in whatever venture it is you're involved with, then it's probably a good time to pull out. Because if you know, like, I mean, the math is there. It's just physics. You know, any empiricist, you don't have to be religious, or you don't have to believe anything to be a prepper, because it's objective. It's truth-based. You can see with your own eyes why the system is destined to fail. Gold was up by over 2% today, I believe, and that didn't correspond to just a decrease in the dollar. Typically, the dollar goes down, gold goes up. The dollar went down a little bit, but gold went up a lot, and Bitcoin went down a lot. So that tells you that people are buying gold today, and there's a heightened interest in gold, and that explains why there was all that central bank gold buying recently. So you could see the banks are selling off, some of them. We got, it's interesting to see all this stuff beside it. And that's why I make this map, because so we can see it all at once. So we can see the chaos happening at the same time, because this all feeds into each other. We got Kremlin subs deploying off of American shores. We got the TikTok thing going on. Interestingly, with the TikTok thing, they're finally starting to say, hey, this is having a negative effect on our kids. It's making people dumb. Senior intelligence official warns of TikTok's influence on U.S. citizens. They're trying to be nice about it, but what they're saying is that you can influence people with this kind of social media. It's not just about privacy and that. No, that's not the real thing they're really worried about. Sure, that's probably a little bit about it, because sure, technically, most people don't read the terms of service. I'm sure it allows TikTok to listen in on your calls and do all that stuff, which is basically the Chinese listening into hundreds of millions, well, not hundreds, tens of millions of Americans' calls. And if those happen to be, you know, people who work in the government or even private agencies, who knows how much information they've already got. But the real problem is that it's making people really dumb. And we already know that we're already really dumbed down by technology. So if you go on TikTok, we had a TikTok account we started 3 months ago, okay? It's already got 135,000 subscribers, whatever they call it, followers. And that's funny, because it took us probably 4 or 5 years to get to 135,000 on YouTube. Now, arguably, our production is better now. We kind of know what we're doing a bit more. But still, that's crazy. But what I've noticed is that the content over there is you have to keep it much more simple for people. It's a much younger audience, more fickle audience, because they're just, one thing after another. So it's, you can't be too deep. You can't go into any depth on TikTok. Everything has to be really, really bite-sized and simple. And what I've noticed about a lot of the content on TikTok, it's incredibly divisive. Like, I thought that, social media had reached its high point. Remember, they did that documentary where they talked about how people in their virtual filter bubbles were being showed more of the same, so it was radicalizing people. Well, TikTok is doing that to an extreme extent. It's almost like the app is there to get people really fired up and angry at each other. So who knows what the end result of that is going to be. The only reason why we're doing it is because you have to diversify this day and age. Because right now, frankly, you don't know, when somebody is going to flick the switch on your channel. So you got to be diversified. Dow plunges 500 points, stock collapse. We got these crazy weather anomalies happening right now. Level 4 of 4 warning for excessive rainfall issued in California areas. We're entering El Nino, which is supposed to be an even hotter weather pattern for most of where people live. So it's going to be interesting to see how hot it actually gets this year, because Europe had its second warmest winter on record, second only to 1 or 2 years ago, I do believe. And as you can see by this animation here, and I'm not saying we need to pay carbon taxes to Justin Trudeau or anything, but this is just the reality, guys. I'm an empiricist, okay? I'm just telling you what the scientists know. You can make of it what you will. You could say it's a long cycle and it's no big deal. But what I'm saying is that it's going to affect supply chains, because our global supply chain is built around weather operating within a certain variance. And if we're outside of that by too many standard deviations, so to speak, it's not going to end well. So here's we were in 1984. Okay, we're just going to go forward here. 1985, 1900. Things are pretty normal, right? Pretty normal. And the 30s, we get a bit of a warming period. We had that Dust Bowl. Maybe that was actually somewhat human-induced because we didn't know how to farm properly back then. And then things corrected itself. It kind of went back to normal. But then you had this post-World War II industrial activity start. So you could see things starting to warm up a little bit. Okay, things are warming. Things are getting really hot now. 1990, that's when all the global warming talk started, right? Is there something going on here? And then as you can see, going up to 2003, it's starting to get a lot warmer. And then by 2010, it's getting really warm, 2015. And by 2022, there are parts of the planet that are literally 4 degrees warmer than normal. You know how they say 1.5 degrees Celsius? That doesn't mean everywhere on the planet is 1.5. That means some parts of the planet are going to be 10 degrees hotter than normal, whereas others might be, -2 or -3. But on the whole, it means that the Arctic sea ice is going to melt, and that is going to lead to what some people are thinking is going to be a runaway effect. Like I say, I don't know what the outcome is going to be. All I know is that it's not going to be compatible with the current way we do things, and everything is going to have to be restructured. Now, that might be fine if we weren't entering a multipolar Cold War world, because you cannot, contrary to what some people are saying, to what some idealists are saying, yeah, BRICS is just going to coexist with the US dollar and the euro and everybody's going to get along. No. You don't have a multipolar world in the modern day without a Cold War. Okay? We tried that with the Soviets and the Americans. It nearly ended in nuclear Armageddon. It actually ended with Britain and the United States both putting out movies of the world ending. And then around that time, Reagan watched it and he said, okay, this can't happen. So I'm predicting, here's my prediction. If the shit doesn't hit the fan, I'm hoping somebody's got to win. You cannot have a multipolar world. But now it's even worse. We're going to have Mexican standoff between the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans. Before it was the Soviet Union and the Americans. Now it's 3. So it's a tripolar world. So we're going to see a couple movies in the next year or so. Hollywood is going to give us some nuclear war movies. And I think that is going to get the public worried, and that could potentially create some resistance to further fanning the flames of this conflict and pushing people into peace talks. Hopefully, something like that has to happen. There has to be a drastic change in the way that people are understanding this conflict. The reason why I bring that up is because the only way you're ever going to be able to be adaptable to something like this and feed 8 billion people is if you don't have a constant state of war and financial collapse and contagion breaking out everywhere, okay? So I think this hysteria that we're seeing right now in the markets is only the beginning. I think it's only the beginning. I think this is going to get crazier and crazier. I think we're just, I think if you got into gold, it's never a bad idea. And I'm not a person, I don't even like philosophically or spiritually believe in gold. I think gold is actually, in many cases, it's the root of evil in a lot of ways, because it's at once the worst and best thing that ever happened to humanity. Because so much, destruction has been done in the name of greed caused by gold. At the same time, it provided us the basis for a monetary system that helped us evolve throughout the ages and establish a system by which we could engage in elaborate forms of trade. And without it, who knows where we would be, really, which is why it's one of those things that, if you're ever a believer in simulation theory or God or whatever, you have to ask yourself, isn't it, without this one rare metal that has all of these features that make it perfect for being used as a monetary method of denominating value, isn't it just perfect, almost? Perfect in a bad way because it gets us to kill each other for it. Regardless, if you don't have any of it and the shit goes down, then I guess you're going to be SOL. But hey, as long as you still got good family, good friends, this information is not to scare you, it's to prepare you. Understand, nobody gets out of here alive. I want you to enjoy life. I want you to be grateful for everything you got, because tomorrow, who knows? Who knows? You get a blood clot, you drop dead. You just never know nowadays, right? The way things are going, guys. So all I'm saying is be prepared for things to get really, really crazy in the years ahead. Doesn't look like it's going to slow down. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And I want to know, what would you do if right after this video came on, an emergency alert kicked on? Would you think it was real? Could you know it was real? Would you act as if it was real? Because you just never know nowadays. You never know. Is it going to be a hack? Is it going to be a deep fake? Is it the government messing with us? Are they running some sort of experiment? Who knows? I personally would probably take it seriously. I would do what the prudent thing to do would be to get into the bunker, and the bunker I don't have. We got a crawl space, so, we could probably ride it out, but I don't think we would be a nuclear target, not a direct one anyways, but we'd still have to deal with the fallout. More on that next week, guys. Enjoy your weekend. Take care. Hug your loved ones, and yeah, drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.